let's start out with your near-death experiences, and maybe you could just share with us whatever information you feel is relevant and what happened in each of those.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to take the whole time because I want to get to some of the questions that your audience might have on that. Uh, well, the first thing to note is that I think a lot of people we have near-death experiences, or there's a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, but I think the key point for me was I was groomed or honed to have these near-death experiences to allow me to jump to higher levels of consciousness. So it's like skipping a couple grades. It's like you're in kindergarten and now you're in like 10th grade. It's more
Right.
of that. So which is really exciting. When I was younger, in my early 20s, and even before then, I was always searching for the meaning of life, really. Mostly, we were pretty, our family was pretty well off, but even with that, we had a lot of problems, and my dad was a doctor, and we'd have clients from all over the world, and they would share their problems with my dad, and I'm going, well, they're well off. Why do they have problems? Because like in today's society, we think that, gosh, if you make a lot of money or you're well off, you don't have any problems, and that's not the case, right? You still get ill, you still age, you still have love issues and all that. Um, so that didn't really work out for me, or that success space. And then the other aspect was people go towards religion as well. It's like, well, I'm going to go towards religion, and I read a lot of the books, religious books, a lot of spirituality books and all that at a young age. Just I used to read a lot, and that didn't work out well either, because both groups and everybody in between had a hell of a lot of problems. And I'm going, well, if religion was supposed to do this, it'd be great. And again, there's nothing wrong with religion. I think religion is really great. There's nothing wrong with wealth. But again, what was missing, that those two things didn't work out well for people. And when I had my first near-death experience, which was, I used to work in a warehouse, unloading rail cars. It was a college job, and I had my jaws crushed. So I was hanging. Well, I'll tell you the whole story. So in a rail car, they've got these moving walls. So if you can imagine these moving walls, and these moving walls hold the products in place, and it was stuck. It's about a half-ton wall. So I figured, well, I'll climb up and just pull on the top part while the team members were pulling on the bottom. And as they did, this thing just gave way, and it slid across the rails. And the thing that stopped it was my jaw.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, I could feel the crack just, and then I felt nothing. And basically, I felt bliss. And this is the first experience that I've had really understanding what it means to be in your full potential. Now, it sounds kind of crazy because it's like, well, literally, I died, and I was seeing myself outside of my body, just like you do in the movies, where you're just kind of floating. And I was floating, and I looked back, and I'm going, wow, we're so limited the way we were, or the way we are in our physical form. And then I realized, it's like, wait a second, what am I doing here if I'm over there? It's like there's two of me, two identities, and it's like, oh gosh, that was my living body, my living form. This is the real me. And it was kind of scary for a second, because it's like, gosh, I'm never going to see anybody anymore. But then all of a sudden it's like it turns into bliss, and you totally forget what I consider now the 1% of who we think we are. That 1% is, all the money you make, all the pains and traumas and the joys and successes and all that stuff that you have. That equates to about 1% of your potential compared to the 99. So I was living, Melissa, 99% of my being. And it was amazing, by the way. And in that process, I escaped into what they call the tunnel of light. That tunnel of light is layers, I think, where your spirit kind of goes through and reclaims itself. It removes itself from its identity of, say, time and space. And I went into the level of the life review. Um, and for your audience, I think it's important to note that it's not really a life review that we go through. It's more of a life relive. It's where you relive your life, and it's not a review. You literally relive your life. You go through all the things, like, birthing and growing up and, falling down and all that. You really relive it. It's not, again, it's not a memory. It's highly important, um, to acknowledge that. But you live your whole life, in my case, 22 years, in maybe a second or two, which really throws you off, because it's like, well, how did I just live 22 years of my life in just mere seconds? You know, and at that time, when you start to relive your life, you're not reliving your life from, again, a kindergarten level for the first time living life. You live it from your grander level of who you are. So it kind of aligns, or it kind of heals all the things that you went through. Not kind of, it does heal all the things that you went through. And there was never a moment where you go, oh, I should have done that, or I could have done that, or why the hell did this happen to me, or anything like that. It was just about, oh, I understand, and it gives you that warm, chocolatey feeling that I was telling you about your podcast, Love Covered Life. It felt like that, um, and it was beautiful. And then something or someone just goes, yeah, you can stay here, but, and as soon as they say but, it's just like you get pushed back into your body, and that's where I felt the pain, and that's where I came back into my body, and I dropped to the floor, and that's where, I had, yeah, and the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital with my jaws wired shut. I don't remember anything in between, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. A little scary, but beautiful. I understood the meaning of life the way Einstein would have said, that one equation, that equates what life would be about. I understood that. We can explain that later for you. But yeah, that was my first near death.
Wow, amazing. So that one happened when you were 22, you said?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then when did the next one happen?
The next one happened in my mid 40s, kind of a midlife crisis. Again, I had all the toys, the boats, the, $1 million home and all that stuff. And, I was still searching. It's like, gosh, this is it. It's like, and I work with a lot of clients nowadays, that are, really well off. And it's like, hey, there's got to be more. Well, I was there, and this was, we went on a cruise, and it was on a rafting trip. You know how you go on a cruise and then you go on these excursions, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we went on a rafting trip, and it's like, for some reason, the universe knows what's happening to you. Now I know it more. Obviously, the science behind it, but when we went there, everything was in line for me to drown. It was a drowning experience. Um, they had, um, they didn't have enough life jackets for me, but, I thought, well, I'm a strong swimmer, so I'll just, I can go without. Um, and the river was quite fast, and I was with my kids, and as we were getting on to the inner tubes, it's like the jungle, Melissa, just quieted down. It was like deathly quiet, just like in those movie scenes. Everything just like quiets down. No birds chirping. There was no wind anymore. It was just the most, and it really struck me. It's like, why is everything so serene? I don't know if you've been like before a tornado hits, everything is just quiet. It was kind of like that, you know.
Wow.
Going, wow, that's interesting. And I didn't think anything of it. And then as soon as we jumped in, the guide goes, well, you got to be careful because the river is really fast. You might get pulled into tributaries where we'll never see you again. So it's like
Mm.
shit, hold on. But as soon as we pulled off, what happens? My sons and I went one way, the other, my wife at the time and my other kids went the other way, and so we were just getting pulled into what they call a cenotes, or a hole in the river. You know, is a huge rock that was jutting out with just this big hole. So I pushed my sons off to the side, and I got sucked in to the inside. And that's where it was, again, a very familiar. Uh, it's like, oh, good. I was kind of excited about it. It's kind of weird. I knew I was going to drown, but also excited because how many times can you get to meet your real version of who you are? You know what I mean? And live to tell about it. Or there's a lot of people who have a near death experience that goes, gosh, I just want to go back to that time where everything was just brilliant, you know? And people always go, it's like, gosh, what do I do? So I was kind of excited, but then also sad. It's like, gosh, it's the last time I'm going to see, my wife at the time, my kids, and all that. And so uh, I escaped my body again, and I could see my body float away, into the bowels of the earth, and I just floated, through the rocks, through the water, and into this heavenly space. This time, though, I went past the tunnel of light, where you would graduate, where I would say souls or your spirit graduate, and I peeked behind the curtains on how spirits are. At that level, you have access to anything that you need to be or want to be. There's no time or space, which is really beautiful. The amount of love you have for yourself or others, I mean, it's just one level of love, just pure raw love, is about 1 million times grander than anything that you would experience here. And it's just euphoric. So it really taught me a lot, but I still had the identity of a physical form. I remember that. Um, and, and I was realizing that. Then all of a sudden, it turned into, I was like transformed into a beautiful blue space. And that's where I lost all identity of like human identity. It was just nothingness. I think it was like beyond time and space, where you're just like literally a universe of your own. And it was the most beautiful thing. And you could have access, or I had access to, um, all the knowledge that ever was, is, and shall be, because there's no time there. So everything's all, everything you have access to all at the same time. And it was just a bliss state. And it lasted, well, to me, forever, because there is no time there. I don't know how to equate it, but when there's no time, it's just like grandness is in front of you. And it just, how sometimes you look at a beautiful picturesque painting, or, a baby, and just like time stands still. When they say it's like that. It's literally time stands stills, and it's like, whoa, this is so cool. And you're just mesmerized by it. So I don't know how long I was there, but again, it was timeless. But somehow I got back into my body, and the interesting part was that instead of being downriver, I found myself on the edge, in a quieter shallow, on the edge of the river, about 100 yards above river, rather than downriver, which really perplexed me. I'm going, how the heaven did I get here? I should have been down somewhere else. And it was amazing. And that's where my gifts and abilities, and this is where, I guess the story really starts on, what I can do, not only for myself but to help others, that go way beyond say, the limitations of psychology or medicine or anything else that we've ever experienced here.
Wow. I have so many questions for you already, and I have there's several ways we could take this, but maybe let's finish with the third near-death experience, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Sure. The third near death, it was just recent, this past year. No, not 2023, but past, like May 2022. I was in Peru, and and I was telling my fiance Faye, is like, gosh, something's big gonna happen to me, and I always think, oh, I'm going to get upgraded, which means that my abilities are become more succinct. Like back in the day, I could work on somebody for like 45 minutes. So today I can work on somebody for about 5 minutes and get better effects. So to me, I thought, oh, my abilities are going to get upgraded. So I had no recollection of having a near-death experience, but I went to Peru. I don't know if it was the elevation, but my heart basically stopped. And they said that some interesting things. If you've ever been to a Peruvian emergency room, it's kind of scary. It's not like the West. That's one thing. But I saw myself float above, and my son was literally holding me down at the time, because he probably felt that I was off, and I could just float. I could just see myself, kind of hovering over. And then I went into this beautiful space, and it was like that deep ocean blue again. And I don't know how long I was there, but they checked my brain. They took a CAT scan of my brain, and it was like literally like mush, basically dead. And then like 20 minutes later, I guess I came back. So they checked me out again, and my brain was like pristine, like a 30-year-old brain rather than a 62-year-old brain. They had given me some potassium. I was deathly low on potassium, where my heart literally, had stopped. That's how low I was on potassium. And then, well, ever since then, still having some issues here and there, but after that, uh, uh, um, great realizations on how this reality works at a very deep level came about. And my gifts, obviously, uh, more precisely honed. So some
Thank
crazy,
you.
crazy stuff.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And I'll ask you some questions about your experiences
Absolutely.
first, and then we'll get into your gifts and what you do.
Okay.
So, you may have covered this a little bit already, but in your
Mhm.
first experience, you said that you realized you're only living in 1% of your potential here on Earth. And in your experience, you lived in the full 100% of your potential. How would you describe that? What is that? What is it to be living your full potential, and what does that feel like?
Well, you felt like one of those Marvel comics you see in today's movies. It's like you could just do anything. You had the power. If you could imagine, doing something, you would have the ability. You just knew that you could just create it,
Mm,
in physical form. Obviously you can't. It wasn't about, oh, I'm gonna fly like Superman or anything like that, but the potentiality of what we could do here in this reality was amazing. To become successful, you knew what real success was, deep level success. And there's no limitations. It's, when you're a kid, you know how you just think about, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be that. And so it's like that, but you actually know that you can do it. You just have a deep knowing that you can render or create anything that you want. Because this reality that we're creating right now, we're creating it, by the way.
mm,
So I had access to that portion, say, of the consciousness that creates the reality that we exist in. And we're just
Okay.
scratching, we're just scratching the surface of what we could do here. So I was getting into that potentiality of what we could be here.
Wow, okay.
And the
So
love,
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
and the love, obviously there's no judgment, there's no, you see the beauty in everything and everyone. You see the potentiality of every, and that's, I still carry that. I feel the deep love for everybody. And that's the difference, I guess, or that's what I do. I see your full potential of who you could be, and then I see your potential of what you think you are.
Right.
And that's how I really help shift people.
Okay. So, is it possible for us to fully live in 100% of our potential here, or are there some limitations to this reality that we just can't get beyond?
Uh, there are some limitations. So it gets a little technical. I don't know if you're into the science behind it, but it's straight out science. It's not woo-woo stuff, or it's not anything spiritual or religious. It literally is. I've created a science behind it all. It's called exponential intelligence, which I teach
Okay.
on, like, on my podcast channel, XI, exponential intelligence, and Moss on Sunday, which I explain the definitions of life, or how life, basically explain life. So if you think about you as, say, a pure spirit, 100% potential here, right? Um, and then if you think about filters, so basically what we've done to create this scenario of, say, feeling or being in one's body, you would have to create, say, time and space. Does that make sense? So that would be a
Yes.
filter. So your first filter, you have your spirit body, or I would call it your timeless self, here. And then there's a filter that filters out or brings in, say, the properties of time and space, how time and space would work. And then
Mhm.
from that, the properties of this planetary system, like electromagnetism, how gravity works and all that stuff.
Right.
Like, all those things are created. And then your human form, right? You're in human form. A human form has a certain shape, so on. The organs function differently. So you'd have the filter of human form, and then being a woman or a man or whatever else, right? Those are all filters. If you had, say, a tragic experience, that's a filter. Whatever you've inherited from your, genetics, your parents, that's another filter that you see your version of self through. So your potential is here. By the time you have all these millions of filters that you've gone through, your parents' experiences, not just your parents, but their lineage, humanity's experiences, and then you add yours on, you're way over here. So you don't know the real potential. So to answer your question, can you live in 100% of your potential? You could live in most of your potential, to the limitations of being in human form, because you can't remove that filter, otherwise you couldn't exist in human form. So,
Mhm.
and that's what our trajectory is, to literally remove all the possible filters that we don't need, like, um, being incomplete, being in lack, sacrificing ourselves, all those things that we think that is real here is not. We could be humans in full form, or full potential.
Wow. Thank you so much for laying that out. I've never heard it described like that before so clearly as to what limitations are just part of being in human form and what limitations we can actually overcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, and most of the limitations that people see themselves on aren't even theirs. When I see people, and I can tell I'm working on you, or I can tell, I don't know, you feel different to me. And I think, even if this is a recording, your audience will probably feel different, just because I just work on people as we speak. So that's a natural. Anyway, what I was going to say is that most of people's limitations aren't even theirs. I would say over 90% of who you think you are is a derivation or a cumulative total of of your parents and their lineage when you were born, if that makes sense for you.
That does make sense.
Your identity of, when you first came into that single cell of who you were, you got locked in time and space, and then you got locked in with all the filters or programs from your parents. Hereditary patterns, health patterns, the way you look, relationship patterns, all those things that we think we have free choice, we don't. That's locked in, and then you just add your own experience to it, and then you pass that on to your kids. So so what we do at XI is, well, we remove all those filters so you can be the best possible you that you can be.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's very fast, by the way.
I would love to hear more about the process. Oh, no, I want to make sure I don't forget to mention this. I will have your YouTube linked in the description because I'm actually really interested in the science behind all of this, and I'm sure there's other people that are as well.
Yeah,
But
and it explains all the things that like science can't explain at this moment. So and right now it seems like that can't be true, but it's science that I would say would show up in about 10 or 15 years. Although there's more and more science coming around from it, like the science of frequencies, the science of, say, deep state meditations, quantum neurobiology. Those are all segments that we could study from that to find out more, or those fields.
yes,
Yeah,
just fascinating. I just spoke to someone earlier today who's in the quantum biology realm and explaining all this from that level. So it's just fascinating. And I'm glad that we're moving in that direction of being able to understand these things.
yes, absolutely. And this is where, you know, think of it this way. Again, the science side is that, if your science, if your belief system, if there's always an exception to the rule, then that means that you're not at the top level of why something is happening to you, or even at a scientific level. Again, if there's always exceptions or even one exception, you're not at the top level or first principle, say, definition of, say, that rule or that belief or that like, say, physics, like world physics.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So if there's an exception to the laws of physics that we currently understand, then there has to be a higher understanding that includes that exception.
Absolutely. Yeah, just keep working at it.
Hmm.
Just keep searching for deeper answers.
Hmm. So you mentioned that when you were in your near-death experience, you saw that we're completely creating our reality. And
Absolutely.
I have a question about that. You seem like a good person to ask
Yeah.
because so a lot of times when I'm going throughout my life, I'll be presented with challenges
Mhm.
and I will have this very clear understanding that I created this challenge.
Yeah.
So let's say there's a situation in relationships that's bringing out an insecurity that I thought I had dealt with, but clearly is still in there. And I don't respond well in the beginning, but then I receive this insight that you created this. This isn't real. You created this so that you could face and transcend this issue. And so my question is, how much of this am I creating everything, or are we co-creating somehow, especially when it involves other people? Like, did they agree to help me with this issue, or it just seems like a really complex system?
No, that's a really beautiful question, really in depth. So think of it this way. When people go, well, they're in my life because I need to learn a lesson. right? That's what we always say, right? Especially if it's like, especially if it's like your twin flame. It's like your twin flame beats the hell out of you, and you go, well, that's my twin flame because I need to learn a lesson. That's not really true, you know. The way I see it is that you're running a program of being abused, and then you would attract somebody that would abuse you. So that's why they're in their life.
That makes sense.
And there's been a lot of psychological studies where they've placed a woman with abusive patterns, and 1 out of 50, I forgot the study, but it's about 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 men. So she's basically speed dating. No, it doesn't matter how the person looks like or whatever. She's attracted to men that would abuse her. Time and time again, that one woman would attract that one man that would abuse her out of the 50 people. So basically that's how, and then people go, well, that's my life. And it is their life because that's the program that they're running. So that's one aspect of it. Most people don't realize though that they're creating it. And when, Melissa, when you say that you created it, do you mean, most people think that they created it from the cognitive level, like what's between your head? And that's not the case. You created it back here from your, again, genetics, your like human history, like, you're a woman. So your filters that you run are everything that humans have run, and then everything that a human woman has run, and then you filter your piece of that, you query your piece of that, and you call yourself Melissa. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd like to give you a chance to talk about, well, I would like to ask you about how your gifts developed after your near-death experiences and what you took away from those.
Yeah. So the first near-death experience really allowed me to understand, the deeper layers of, say, the seen and the unseen, right? So I would see people, and then I would go, oh, this is why they're thinking the way they are, and many people do that, right? It's like you start to see, or, if you know a person long enough, you start to notice their habits, right? It's like, oh, I know what that person is going to do. But so you magnify that ability at a deeper level. Strangers, I could come up to them and go, oh, I know what they're thinking. That kind of, those kind of gifts. The second near death really allowed me to tap into the mechanics of how the unseen, or I would call it beyond the quantum realm, works. So you have, I would say, the Newtonian, and again, this goes into the science. You have the Newtonian physics where, an apple falls, right, and it creates the, like gravity and so on like that. And then scientists couldn't figure out, why some of the stuff didn't work. So they went into quantum, say, physics or quantum mechanics, right? And that world dictates the bigger world. I work at, say, the level of science that goes beyond, say, the quantum realm. So it's a bridge between the unseen or the seen or the time bound or the timeless. So the second near death allowed me to go past, into deeper layers or granular layers on why things happen the way they did. So when you get to that first level, or again, the first principle level, and you can edit people at that level, um, massive changes come about. So it took me a while to hone it. I would say over 100,000 client sessions, over a decade's work, research, working on tens and tens of, 100,000 people, or probably more by now. So again, a lot of research
Mm.
on that.
Wow. So you've worked with a lot of people at this
I've worked
point.
with a lot of people. Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell me anything about yourself. I can just
Mm.
scan you and see what's going on.
And you have an upcoming event, your NDE frequency meditation, integrating the physical and divine, which
Yes.
I will link in the description.
Mhm.
And I'd like to give you a chance to share about that and anything else that you have going on.
Yeah, that's really again allowing you to understand that there's a bigger portion of you that's out there, because most people, you might want to call it your spirit. I call it your timeless self. Most people think that they're physically bound here, and they have their spirit, but they really have no clear definition of what a spirit is, or what it does, or what it can do for you. So in that meditation, and also the 18-day meditations that we do, every other month as well, where you can transform your life, in 18 days pretty much. It is literally where, most people think that their physical world is all that there is, and that's all they have control of. But this is just literally a mirage, and it doesn't, and that's why no matter what you do to change, you always get the same results. Like say you make $1 million, you still feel the same way on the inside, right? And then they make $1 billion, and I work with people like that. They still feel the same way on the inside, right? Or they change dates, right? They still feel the same way on the inside, or the same result happens. So what we do is like that. This divine is, it's like you start to understand that you're not creating your life from the physical component here. You're actually creating your life from, say, a spiritual component, or your timeless self here. And when you can, say, access that, this physical aspect of you starts to change radically. And this is where, magical healings come about. People cure themselves. People age a lot different than what they do. Amazing things can happen that, again, goes beyond, say, what people would call miracles.
Hmm. So have you seen miracles and physical healings in your work?
Oh, all the time. If you go to the website, I can name you. I can give you a couple hundred stories actually. People who've needed heart transplants. They don't need heart transplants
Mm.
anymore. There's people who. It's kind of an interesting story. This person, again, he wasn't blind completely, but he was going blind. Worked on him for a little bit, and he had, and this is how miracles work. He had an accident where he slipped down the steps. He hit his head, after I worked on him, and then like about a month later, he could see perfectly. So, those kind of things. There's miracles where, people can like start walking again, or tumors like disappear. And again, I don't claim to cure anybody or anything like that, but what we do best is awaken your natural possibilities, your limitless self of who you are. And then you start to go, you know what, I don't need that cancer anymore. Because a lot of times people who have cancer, it's their way out because they don't find any other solution to life. You know what I mean? And
That
it's like,
makes sense. On a subconscious level,
yep,
and they
at a
may
very,
not be consciously thinking I want cancer, but
yes,
I
absolutely.
understand that because I feel like I have created my subconscious programmings, or my ancestry, or whatever it is that's determining my experience of life, has definitely created physical challenges. And
Absolutely.
I've also experienced supernatural healing, so I'm a huge believer that that is possible and can happen.
Yes. Yeah, it's just as long as you can access your supernatural self. So you don't need, say, intervention or outside, say, an outside deity or an outside whatever, that you want to call it. You just have to awaken your own connection between your timeless self and your time bound self. You awaken that connection between the two of you, and amazing things can happen. People can age younger. Um, People can heal themselves. People don't have to age like their parents do, or anything like that.
And you may have answered this already, but how can you connect with your spiritual self? And
Well, how can you connect with your spiritual self? There's lots of different ways. A near death really connects you if you're awakened. That really works out well. Again, the key is that if you're awakened, a lot of the classes that we teach, a lot of the meditation, deep state, and I call them meditations because that's what people can associate. But literally, I get you into this zone where you can bypass all those filters that I talked about, and you get to see who you really are. This is where you go, gosh, you know what? I don't need to look like my mom anymore. So you start to awaken to that fact. It's like, wait a second, these aren't my filters that I'm running. These are mom's filters that, that we're running. And then people can, choose to let go of that, and they don't age like their mom. So that's meditations, the way we do meditations, not normal meditations. We call them hyper meditations. Those are fantastic ways. But if you don't do anything with me, you can do what I call spatial referencing, which is basically becoming highly present on where you are in reference to the reality that you create. So, to put it simply, and this is just basic level spatial referencing, and then there's advanced where you can tap into different realities and different dimensions of time and space. But basic spatial referencing is like, the door is over there, my collarbone is over here. And it sounds kind of silly, but, or the windows, to my left side, my ears over here. If you did that, it bypasses the mind. So it helps you become really, really present with where you are. And then once you start to become really, really present in a dimension of time, not present in your conscious mind, so to speak, you start to become aware of the filters that you're running that you don't need. A lot of times people just use spatial reference. Those people who are, again, depressed or even like suicidal, if they do that for a little bit, they actually remove themselves, or they get off their medications, and they're actually happy people. That's how powerful it is. And we
Wow.
teach that on the 18-day meditations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I have one final question for you, and you alluded to this in the beginning of the interview about that you saw what the purpose of life is. So, what is the purpose of life?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The purpose of life, people go, well, it's saving the whales, it's saving the planet, and it's saving all that. You know, it, uh, I mean, those things, they, you don't need to save anything. You don't need to do anything. Your only purpose is to remove as many filters as you can so you see who you really are. So, and that's your real purpose. And once you can do that, saving the planet, saving Earth, saving all that stuff that people go through, or solving all the problems that we have in this world will literally disappear, and you'd have a different reality. It's literally about my first near-death experience. It's like I started to realize, it's like, dang, that's who we really are. That's your purpose, to find out and be conscious of it in physical form. That's your real purpose. If you can do that, everything else that you need and way beyond will show up for you at your doorstep, literally, for you.
Mas, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview and explain these things in a way that's easy to understand. I will
Perfect.
have your links in the description to your Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, your website, as well as your upcoming event. Is there anything else you'd like to share about what you do or where viewers can find you?
Yeah, people can. I think the best way is we do a lot of free stuff, because it does get intense. The paid stuff that we do, it does transform me quite a bit. So for those people who are new to me, I would go to massajady.live. That's MASSAJADY.live. It's a YouTube channel. It explains life. The XI podcast, Exponential Intelligence Podcast, they're all free. It gives you the logistics on how or what the science is behind what I do. And then whenever you're ready, you can always go to the website, massajady.com, and you can purchase stuff if you'd like to really jump in. So,
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mas. I really enjoyed this.
thank you so much.